Next on the docket, federal corruption trials. In a minute, we're going to take a look at the retrial of Shelly Silver, but let's begin first with Joe Percoco. Remember, former top Cuomo aide, he's facing federal charges. Well, Dominic Carter, he gave us a preview of what to expect.
He was the governor's closest aide, but prosecutors say Joe Percoco pocketed more than $300,000 in bribes from companies with business before the state. Prosecutors say, just like in the Sopranos TV show, Percoco used the term ziti as code language for cash. But one former federal prosecutor says a conviction will not be a walk in the park.
The case against Mr. Percoco does have some weaknesses. His case is very like the McDonald case. And, you know, the Supreme Court has held that simply scheduling meetings for a client who pays you money, hooking that client up with the right bureaucrats, those are not crimes, even if you yourself work for the government. Those don't count as official acts, which can be crimes. And the other weakness in the case is that some of the actions that Mr. Percoco took, he took at a time when he had resigned from government and was working for the Cuomo re-election campaign. I think it's a stretch for the government to claim that those are official acts that are crimes.
Percoco was so close to the Cuomos, he was referred to as the third son by the governor's dad. The grand jury alleged two overlapping schemes with common threads of bribery, corruption, and fraud. The feds say Percoco took money, some in the form of a low-show $7,500 a month job for his wife from an energy company and a Syracuse developer. His wife has not been criminally charged.
Even if they had the facts to charge her, Dominic, I think they made the right call not doing so. There's always a risk in a criminal case that the jury will see the government as overreaching.
There is also a changing of the guard at the U.S. Attorney's Office that brought the indictment. Preet Bharara and the man that replaced him, June Kim, are gone. President Trump has nominated a law partner of former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani as the new U.S. Attorney for the Southern District, Jeffrey Berman.
I know Jeff, and he's a very able lawyer. I knew June Kim. He was also a very able lawyer. I don't think it'll make a bit of difference who's at the top. It's the assistants in the courtroom who will make the difference in the case.
Richard, after a few delays, no additional ones are expected. Jury selection starts on Monday. At the federal courthouse in Manhattan, I'm Dominic Carter. Richard, let's go back to you in the studio.
And Dominic will be there for the duration of the trial. And if you remember from Menendez, he will not be short of headlines. All right. Andrew, the things that surprised me about this already have been the wife of Percoco certainly was a player in this, the equivalent of a no-show job or how she got the job, and the questions. She was not charged. Is that for the public typical strategy, which is, you know, you have the leverage of potentially charging someone else? Or were you surprised that she wasn't also, you know, she didn't get an indictment as well?
Well, I mean, Richard, it depends what the charges are that you'd be contemplating against someone like his wife. You know, many of the charges involve, him receiving bribes as the role of the aide to Cuomo. Obviously, she didn't serve in that capacity, and so many of the crimes with which Percoco will be standing trial just wouldn't relate to her. She, in theory, could have been aiding and abetting some of those crimes, but I think that if I was a prosecutor, that would likely be diluting the power of my case and the evidence, and maybe a distraction from the trial. And so, more than anything else, it's probably a strategic decision. It's also a prosecutorial discretion question.
Are they going up the food chain here? Is this the point of this? It's Percoco. It's an election year. I'll come back to my world of politics. Percoco extremely close for any of us who covered, and I worked back in the day with the father, okay? Percoco was a present figure there. He was called the third son, as Dominic said. Is that really where this is going at the end of the day?
I think it very easily could be, and we have to understand that, you know, that's the way politics existed. Until very recently, we had a system where more or less this was the norm. So it's somewhat unlikely that you're not going to find
That is
other
Mayo
people.
going off script here, but go ahead. Yes, right.
You're going to find that I think that easily you may end up finding it going up the food chain. I think that it's interesting that Preet Bharara often targeted Democrats and went more after New York State Democrats than anyone else.
Give me an idea, and I know you don't know the answer. Do you think that an offer was already made, hey, listen, we'll change the charges you're looking at if you cooperate, or is the hope, if you're the prosecutor, that if he starts to see that, hey, you could be looking at 20 years here or whatever, mid-trial all of a sudden he'll become a cooperating? Is that what we're really looking at?
Well, also, the more you have at stake, for instance, your family members who are unindicted co-conspirators or possibly have their own independent charges, the fact that you know that could be dropped at any moment gives someone incentive basically to come clean and to testify and to give valuable information.
Now we pivot to Shelly Silver. He's the former New York Assembly Speaker. He was convicted more than a year ago. We covered that trial intensively as well. But as you know, it was overturned last year after a Supreme Court ruling basically redefined what corruption is. And frankly, I still don't know what the new definition is. Well, the retrial, it's set to start in the middle of April. And Doug, without knowing the new definition of corruption, really, and I've spoken to 20 of you guys, and I get 20 different answers as the new standard after McDonnell, is it really just, well, they're going to change the charges, because that was the whole issue of as to why the conviction was thrown out, the jury wasn't charged properly? With proper charges, is he facing the same problem, or did that Supreme Court decision also change what he could or couldn't be guilty of?
Well, it's going to be the same trial, but it's going to be a different trial because the original decision that threw out his conviction, there were statute of limitations problems, issues that are going to come up. So it's going to be the same acts that they're going to be looking at, but it could change the facts in the case, if that's understandable. But they do have more guidance now. In this office now, they're trying the Percoco case, and they've had Dean Skelos, they've had Shelly Silver. I think they understand what they have to prove now, probably much clearer than they did prior to these trials. So I know it does, whenever there's a case like this, there is a bit of interpretation, but I think that office probably understands what they have to do.
Do you think that given that they went through this and there was a conviction with the facts that were presented, that there'd be a greater likelihood if you were the Silver team to say, all right, well, let's find a middle ground here. Let's reach a plea deal that's more amenable to both sides, or they say, hey, this thing got thrown out once. I'm going to, shoot pool here and try it all over again.
Well, remember, it got thrown out on a technical
Right.
thing, a jury charge. So if you're that team, you know that a jury listened to the facts of that case and they convicted him. You can say whatever you want. So putting aside this case, any defense attorney knows that he tried his best, he put the best defense, and he got a conviction. So would he be looking for a plea? Probably.
Dan, I've spoken with great frustration in this program after McDonnell, after Skelos, after Silver, after Menendez. What is corruption, and more specifically, whether it's abuse of office, and I know it's not an actual legal term as it applies to this, do we still have a gray area with this or not?
Yes, there's always going to be a gray area because every single case has different facts. And so you're always going to have different facts. It's going to be case by case. I think what McDonnell did more than anything is it forced the government to show much more of a direct quid pro quo. You really need to show that there was a specific official action that was meaningful, that had the possibility or the likelihood
Without
of
me going on my
impacting.
rant that I'm sure the public is sick of hearing, I've seen obscene quid pro quos in the 4 cases I've said. And for me, if that's not a clear, I'm giving you something, expecting something in return, is the standard now or the bar so high you have to see the manila envelope literally change hands?
No, I don't think so. And I think the cases that you're focused on are Silver and Skelos, which, as Doug pointed out, were both overturned on this technical decision. I think that the cases, when they're retried, are going to be substantially similar. And my experience is with juries that they don't care so much about the technicality. They're going to want to get a sense of whether or not what Shelly Silver did, what Dean Skelos did was wrong, was right, and that's what's going to motivate them. And as long as the government proves their case by a legal standard, I don't think the outcome will be that much different.
All right, I want to save time for our last topic here on the other side of the break here. Attorney works for the client and has to do what the client wants, right? Well, what happens if the lawyer goes rogue? And it's not a theoretical question. It actually happened in a death penalty case. That's when things got really interesting. We'll discuss straight ahead.